Hello, I'm Jonathan Stark, and this is Ditching Hourly. Today I'm joined by my friend Reuven Lerner. Reuven is a Python expert who teaches live courses on-site at companies in the United States, Europe, Israel, and China. Reuven's most recent book, Python Workout: 50 Exercises to Flex Your Python Programming Muscles, is now available through Manning Publishing and has been called the first book you should get after learning Python. Reuven's free weekly newsletter is read by more than 10,000 Python developers and software engineers around the globe, and his Trainer Weekly newsletter is similarly popular with corporate trainers. I did not know this, but Reuven created one of the first 100 websites in the world just after graduating from MIT's computer science department. He opened Lerner Consulting in 1995 and has been offering training services ever since 1996. Reuven, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. I'm super happy to be here.
It's nice to catch up. It's been a while.
Way too long.
Yeah. So your story is one that I think is very inspirational to lots of software developers. So to me, I sometimes jokingly refer to coding as the sort of coal mining of the new millennium. It's this never-ending pursuit that is, perhaps more so than coal mining, is kind of fun at first. In fact, very fun at first. It attracts a lot of people. It feels like a superpower. But combined with the de facto hourly billing approach that most people take and the kind of, at least for me, it started to feel like, spitting into the wind after a while. We're solving the same problems over and over, reinventing the wheel, that kind of thing. And, as one matures in their career or in their business, sometimes their thoughts turn to productized services or training or pure consulting or other approaches. And we were in regular communication as panelists on a podcast while you were kind of going through the transition from, or maybe soon thereafter, from developer/consultant to full-time trainer, teaching people in person and online. So I just really wanted to have you kind of share your experience there and give tips to folks who are perhaps thinking about going down a similar path.
Sure. So my background is, I got a computer science degree and I started working for a computer company as a coder. And then I switched to a different company and was working as a coder. And I would hear about people who, as you said, as they matured, as they got older, they would either move into management, right, in these various companies, that they weren't be coding anymore, or they would go in some other sort of direction. I remember thinking to myself, that's nuts. Programming is the greatest thing ever. Yeah. I'm having so much fun. Who would not want to do this all the time? And perhaps coding at a startup or in a small group, doing like new pioneering cool stuff, yeah, that's kind of fun. But I see now from my corporate clients, a lot of them, you require smart people to work on these things, but you're a very small piece of a very large machine, and you're spending lots of time making sure that the specs work and the tests work, and you're going to meetings and on and on and on. So I have gone through this transition. It took me a long time to sort of realize it's okay to have a CS degree, to be technically knowledgeable, and not be writing code every day. Like, you don't have to hang your head in shame. You're not an inferior being somehow. And in fact, in some ways, like, you're drawing upon that experience and helping people do their work better so they don't have to suffer quite as much as maybe you did or would have. So yeah, I started off programming, and when I moved to Israel in 1995, I decided this was my big chance to try consulting. What did I know about consulting? Almost nothing. So I knew it meant not working for a company. I knew it meant opening my own business. I always sort of joked about, like, even from like elementary school, I'm going to open my own company, but I didn't really know what that meant. And luckily, my last employer in the U.S. was Time Warner, and they said, well, if you're going to open your own consulting company, we'll be happy to have you be, sort of do some freelance work for us. So we'll be your first client. Yeah, it was fantastic. Mm-hmm. So for 4 years, I even called them like my investors in my consulting company because they were paying for 20 hours a week of work. And then I got sort of this other time to go look in other directions. And so what happened was I was playing in all sorts of directions of different technologies. I was doing everything from Linux administration to web application development to helping individuals with their computers, you name it. And then a company came to me and said, hey, instead of having you do this Perl programming, could you teach our people how to do Perl programming. I was like, oh, yeah, that sounds like fun. And so that was my first taste of training. And it took many years of like trying a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So some consulting, some programming, some training. It was basically while I was finishing up my dissertation for my PhD that I was approached by a training company, and they said, would you like to work with us? And I thought, sure. Like while I'm finishing up the dissertation, they can market my courses. And that's when I realized, wow, there's a lot of demand for training. And I really like enjoy it a lot, and I can stack it up long in advance. And the best part, no one is calling me late at night with bug reports.
There's no bug tracker.
Oh my God. Right? Oh my God. And and then I remember still meeting someone on the train, and he asked me what I was doing. And I said, oh, well, I'm doing training. He said, oh yeah, it's a shame it doesn't pay like programming. And my thought was, right, it pays better.
Better.
And programmers don't know this. Programmers are completely ignorant of this. So I now spend most days each day I'm in a different city, often a different country, different company, teaching. I have now about 9 or 10 different Python courses that range in length from a day to 4 days. And I'm now expanding online to teach as well. And I'm having just the greatest time ever. And people think I'm like a super software wizard because every day I am programming. I'm just not doing it for them and for their corporation.
That is exactly what I was going to ask, because I know I get this objection from people all the time. They say, even if they're just going into like pure advisory consulting about, let's say you were just going to do Python performance consulting, that was the only thing you did, or using Python for data visualizations. That was the only thing you did. You weren't training anyone. You're just consulting on how to do it better or faster or whatever. The objection that I get always is from technical people is like, oh, but then I'll get rusty. Like, how will I keep my skills sharp and give good advice or give good training classes or create good training classes if I'm not coding every day? What's your answer to that?
So I have 2 or 3 answers to that. Number one is if you're consulting in a specialized area, let's say it's performance or, AWS or, debugging or whatever it is. If you're helping companies in a consulting capacity to diagnose and even fix problems of a certain sort, you're then seeing a lot of those problems from a lot of different companies. And so your expertise, it's sort of like seeing a doctor who specializes in one kind of disease. They see all the different sort of variations of that disease. And so they're going to be really good at diagnosing and then treating it. You might not be very good at doing other things, but you'll be really good at that because you're going to have such variety. So that's answer one. Answer two is, in my particular case, I just only teach the things that I know. And so I'm not teaching DevOps, because to teach DevOps would mean like setting up hundreds of servers and God knows what. And I'm just not prepared to do that. But I can teach Python. I can teach intro data science. I can't do advanced data science, but I can do intro data science, and that works pretty well. But the third thing is, you need to spend some time then researching. So when I started doing my data science courses, I was spending incredible amounts of time researching and trying and playing and working so that I would understand it better. And I got a sense also of what I do know and where my limits are. That takes some time to sort of figure out. So am I the best person to come in and do a product in Python that needs to ship on X number of servers with a team of 20? No. But am I the person who has done a lot of thinking about how to explain Python so that other people can get the language and then use it to produce products with a team of 20? Yes.
Yeah, that's been my experience too. And I really like the twist you added at the end there, where I wasn't even thinking that, but you're 100% right, which is that it's one thing to know Python, and obviously you have to know Python to teach Python, but it's another skill completely knowing how to teach it. So you can have the information in your head. You could have an encyclopedic knowledge of every bug on every version of Python, on every version of OS. You could have all that memorized, but you still need to be able to communicate it, and communicating it to people in an effective way is a skill unto itself. The other thing, sorry. Yeah, but the first thing that you were talking about, which is what I thought you were going to say, and has also been my experience, which is that something about when you're up in front of a room of 20 people or so on a regular basis teaching a particular topic, you get hit with questions constantly. that are from domain, their domains, not your domains. So they're in a financial services company or whatever. They're in some, they run a knitting shop, or they have all these weird backgrounds and edge cases, and all of these things come funneled into you. And it just creates a almost like I want to say bulletproof domain knowledge of the technology. Like when I was teaching, years ago, I was teaching FileMaker training class, like 20 years ago at this point, I was teaching FileMaker training classes, and like you couldn't stump me with a FileMaker question after 6 months. There was no question I didn't know the answer to. It was like once a month I would learn something new about the product. And do you find
Absolutely.
Do you find in classes, do you get, I imagine when you roll out a new course, people hit you with questions and you get stumped on a regular basis, or it's like a really interesting question or a cool edge case, and that becomes an educational experience for you, I'm guessing, right?
So, I probably get, well, first of all, I definitely see one of my competitive advantages as the combination of I teach very often and I teach in Israel. Israelis are known for being very aggressive, in terms of questioning and trying to stump people and saying, oh, come on, like that can't be true. So, from the time kids are in kindergarten here, the kindergarten teacher says good morning and 10 kids say, really? Really? Are you sure about that? So, right. And just sort of goes downhill from there. The fact that I teach often in Israel means that indeed I'm pelted by a lot of questions all the time. And if I teach a course 5-6 times here in Israel, by the time I go abroad, I can basically anticipate what the questions are going to be. I can teach sort of leading up to that, so they don't even realize they have the questions. And I feel confident when they do ask questions that I've heard them before and I can answer them. That said, on a very regular basis, people ask me questions that I don't know the answers to, just because you're dealing with a very large, complex software system. It's a programming language and tons of modules and so on and so forth. And people are always coming up to me with new things. And I welcome that. I mean, easily 60-70% of the things that I teach are based on questions and comments that I got from people. And so I'm always sort of tweaking and adjusting what I teach to better address the problems that people seem to be having. But I love that. I love the fact that I see it as I'm getting paid to learn cool new things about Python and research them. And I think it also helps me in my business, where I say to them, I don't know everything. I'm going to learn things. Ask me a question. And if I need, I'll do my homework and come back tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, I think we've thoroughly dispelled the notion that you would start to get rusty at Python if you weren't coding every day, like for on the clock, or, for building out a project or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I can totally get why people would think that. And indeed, when I was training through this training company here in Israel for a few years, before I left them and went back to doing it on my own, they actually said, we only hire trainers who are also practitioners in the field. So even they doing training, either as a marketing tactic or because they really believed it, expressed that need.
Right. Yeah, you can, and I can see that, because the reason why I'm even bringing it up in the first place is because I know that objection exists. Even though I think it's a faulty objection, it exists. So I could see someone trying to address it with that approach. So let's rewind the clock a little bit. So you mentioned earlier that a training company approached you kind of out of the blue, and that was your entree into like serious training. Or correct me if I'm wrong, but how did that happen? How did they find you? What was that deal like?
All right, so this is going to sound kind of crazy, but basically, I was walking down the street in Herzliya, just north of Tel Aviv, and I can't remember if I had a consulting gig or I was meeting someone, whatever it was, and someone nearly hits me with their car. And I'm about to let him have it. Don't you know how to drive? And I realized it's someone I knew, someone I'd actually worked with a few years ago. Not a close friend. And so, we laugh and, he apologizes. And he says, wait a second, what are you doing nowadays? And he said, wait, would you be interested in doing training? Because he didn't really work for the training company, but he had an in with them. He said, let me introduce you to them. And you're doing Ruby? Great. So at that point, I was doing tons of Ruby and Ruby on Rails stuff. Well, let me help you out with that. So he gets me into the training company, and they look at my resume and they say, wow, this is great. Actually, what happened was I talked to them on the phone, and they asked me to send them my resume. And they were very skeptical of the whole Ruby thing. But as soon as they saw the resume, they called me back. It was within an hour or two, and said, wait, Python. There was a ton of demand for Python. And I mean, I'd used Python certainly for years and I knew it, but I'd never seen it as like more popular than Ruby. So they had their finger on the pulse of the market and they were like, okay, you can try this Ruby thing, but it's just not going to go anywhere, at least not in the Israeli market. Python is where it's at. So the way it worked with them was, they would talk to companies. They had a whole marketing staff that would just be cold calling and not cold calling their customers all the time, saying, what do you need? This is what we're offering. And they would send out catalogs. It was really a well-oiled marketing, machine. And they would call me up and say, company XYZ needs a Python course next month on the following days. Are you available? And I would say, yes. And so it started off being one course a month. And then it became 2 courses a month. And like within a year or so, I was scheduled out 2 or 3 months in advance and we were sort of stacking them up just because my courses were so popular and Python was so popular and we had to start doing this. And that's when I started realizing, wow, this can be a business in and of itself, right? There's the marketing part and there's the training part, but I'd been in business for myself for a while. I realized it was maybe different marketing, but like it was a viable thing to do. It wasn't just something to do between consulting gigs.
Yes, great point. And did you get a sense of, to the extent that you can share this, did you get a sense of how the numbers were working for them and for you and the comparison between the two?
So, yes, and it happened on a few sort of occasions. So first of all, I showed up at Cisco one day. I did a lot of training there, still do a lot of training there. And it turns out that someone I knew was also doing training at Cisco. And so like we had adjoining classrooms. And I said to him, oh, what are you teaching? He said, oh, I'm teaching Python. Now he's not really such a Python expert, but he was like trying to market himself as such. And I told him that I was working through this training company. And he was like, oh, really? And we compared numbers. And it turns out he was earning twice as much as I was. Cause like they were taking a 50% cut. I was like, wow, I'm such an idiot. Boy, one of these days I've like, got to ask for more. And I think I managed to edge them up a little more on what I was getting, but it's typically going to be that a training company gets 60%, 50-60%. And then a few months after that, I gave what's called an open enrollment course at their offices in Tel Aviv. So my typical bread and butter is I show up at a company and they invite me to teach their group of people. But open enrollment is you get a classroom and then every company pays per seat for up to, 20 seats. And so the training company was selling tickets to, my open enrollment training. And someone said to me during the lunch break, boy, do you know how much we are paying for this? I hope they're paying you really well. I said, tell me, how much are you paying? And that's when I discovered I was getting 10% of the income. And that's when I really blew a gasket and realized, okay, I got to go back to doing this on my own. Like, this is nuts. And I went to the head of training at this training company. And I said, listen, I got to get a larger percentage here. And she said, we have a very expensive building here in the center of Tel Aviv. We can't afford to pay you more. And that was the beginning of the end. That's when I came home and said to my wife, like, I can't go through these people anymore or not for much longer because like, at this point, they're calling up a company saying, when do you want training? Like they're doing literally 5 minutes of work and I'm getting 50% or less of the profits.
Yeah, I mean, in their defense, you did mention that they had a well-oiled marketing machine that probably took them years to set up and so on and so forth. But at a certain point, you were like, I could probably do better on my own. I mean, that's how I would characterize it in a sort of neutral way.
Look, to their credit, I mean, look, I am still not so good at cold calling and getting into companies where they don't know me. So when a company reaches out to me, fantastic. And that happens enough. They don't have to worry about it. But me reaching out to them, now is it time consuming, but it's hard. So if I had started from zero, it would be difficult. And I do appreciate the work and effort that they put into getting their tentacles into all these companies all around, certainly Israel.
Tentacles. Nice visual. All right. Well, that's an interesting lead into, leads. How do you get leads now? So
people
since
call me.
You don't consider yourself a excellent marketer, but how do you generate awareness? How do you build trust with strangers? How do they get attracted to you? What causes them to call you or send an email?
So probably once every month or two, I get a call from a company I've never heard of, or I have heard of them and I've never worked with them before. And I always ask, how did you hear about me? And the most typical story is, you gave a class several years ago at company X the person from company X now works for us. And when they heard that we were going to be using Python, they recommended we call you.
Wow.
So,
tight positioning. Oof.
So
very nice.
Right. So basically, by the way, like I was sitting at the train, like waiting for the train in Haifa, probably about 3 years ago, sitting on the bench there waiting for the train. This guy sits down next to me, looks at me and says, "You do Python training. You're Reuven. I was in your class several years ago." So I mean, originally I was doing training in lots of things, and I found that the more I, niche down, the more I branded myself as a Python trainer and not as a programming trainer, the better business got. So originally I was doing Python, Ruby, Postgres, and Git. And I dropped the Ruby and Postgres, not because I don't like those technologies, but because by saying I do Python training and will pretend that Git is part of Python, like people instantly, like when people want Python training, at least in Israel, they know to call me, right? Like I'm the first or one of the first numbers they call because I'm closely identified with it. And I can take advantage of the fact that people move from workplace to workplace every year or two and to get the word out for me.
Yeah.
Plus
the dandelion principle.
Yeah. And plus like I work with enough big companies that they'll call me and ask for anywhere from, I've got one client where it's like one class a month to other clients where it's once every 2-3 months to others where it's once a year. And I can, expect them to call me once a year, twice a year to come in and do stuff. And that combination, and these big companies have more or less infinite numbers of employees who need to take my course.
Yeah, right. So here's something I want to call out explicitly for the listener, which is that, as Reuven has pointed out, he can teach lots of different things. But when he's promoting himself or when he's doing marketing, he's decided, because it's effective and he's found that it's effective, that he's focused on Python. It's just the one thing. And that seems like, to a lot of people, that feels like death. It feels like boredom. It feels like a lie. But I'm so much better. I can do so many other things. Why would I focus down just on Python? And the visual that I try to stick in people's minds is it's the same as putting a sandwich board out on the sidewalk in front of an Irish pub that says voted best Guinness in town. It doesn't mean they only sell Guinness. It means that that is the thing that's probably the most important to the people walking by who will probably be the best customers. So it makes it memorable. You think, oh, McBride's has the best Guinness in town. Let's go there. Or you're walking by and you see it and you're like, oh, that's a good idea. I'm in the mood for that. Or, oh, this seems like a nice place. Whatever. You don't expect that they only sell Guinness inside, that it's the only thing on the menu. So the point being in this case is, and this is leading up to a question, I promise.
That's fine.
Your Guinness for you is like, you're like the go-to guy for Python training. I will bet, I'm biased because I know you, but I mean, certainly you're the only person in the literal world I would think of if somebody said, hey, do you know a Python trainer? And I'm sure I know probably scores of Python developers or people. I'll probably know 1,000 people who know Python. I bet you I do. But I would not think of any of them. If somebody asked me for a Python trainer, I would only think of you. So what that does is, when in a situation where Reuven is trying to attract a brand new customer who doesn't know him from anybody, it's automatically going to work for people who are looking for a Python trainer. So boom, now you're in the door. Now you're inside the establishment. Now you're sitting at the bar, you're sitting at a table and you're having a conversation like, oh, well, I'm maybe not in the mood for Guinness right now. I'm not in the mood for Python right now. Or you give a bunch of Python courses and they're like, yeah, man, do you know anybody that teaches Git or do you know anybody that teaches Ruby? And you can say, oh, I teach that too.
So it's funny you mention that. So I'll both agree and disagree with you there. So I decided to give up on the Ruby and the Postgres training altogether. Simply because I didn't have time to keep up with those technologies as well. And I wasn't getting as much business in them. So it sort of went together. And also it was a very conscious effort on my part. And I tell people to do this all the time. If you want to be a trainer, don't say I do consulting and training. Say, yes, I train in Python, right? And it gives a totally different image. And when companies call me and they say, well, what do you teach? Like, what courses do you offer? The fact that I can say, go to my website /courses and you'll see all the courses I teach and all the syllabi. That shows like I care about training and that's what I put front and center and that's what they want. They don't want, oh, this is like number 10 on the guy's, list. No, with
they don't want to feel like you're winging it.
Right. And the fact that I have a syllabus that we can then negotiate over as opposed to, well, what do you want? I want that, much better. With the Git stuff, it turned out I was at one of my standard clients where I'm really there quite a lot. And I mentioned something about Git training, that I also do Git training. And the head of training said to me, "Oh my God, are you serious? You do Git training also?" I said, "Why?" She said, "We just signed with, of course, the training company I'd worked with to do Git training." And I said, "Oh, okay. Well, like next time, if you keep me in mind." 6 months later, she turned to me and said, "Listen, they were disastrous. We know we can trust you. Can we do Git with you?" And so now I'm teaching intro Python, and I upsold them on advanced Python and Git. So virtually every one of their hundreds of engineers takes 3 courses with me. And that's like 10 days a year from this company per person. Mm-hmm. And so that's like, it's phenomenal.
Yeah. So let me unpack a little bit of that. So, I actually love that you pointed out that you just wouldn't even do, Ruby, and what was the other one?
And PostgreSQL, database.
Postgres, right. And because you don't need to, right? Like you don't need to have 1,000 beers on tap, to use the Irish pub metaphor.
Right.
Because you've got like, you're maxed out, let's say, or you're getting plenty of business with a even smaller set of offerings than what you could theoretically teach.
And it's worth it for me to develop a new Python course, which fits in with the other Python stuff, than it is for me to learn these other technologies and remember them where there's a disconnect.
Right. And so the point is, to the listener, the point that I want to make to the listener is that you've got a situation where, you have upsells. In other words, like so your marketing to strangers is executed in a different way. Just not Reuven only, just in general. Your marketing to strangers is executed in a different way. It's simplified. It's dumbed down. You need to penetrate through the noise. So it's simplified. It's boiled down. It's the most specific, the most valuable. It's your best offering. It's your best thing. So, all right, great. That's my best thing. But once you're in a conversation with people, it's a different thing. You're in a trusted relationship. There's not as much fear or risk. And you can offer like, oh, I teach Git, or, oh, I teach an advanced Python class. Or if you wanted to do something, I don't know, something like what are some, you said you have like 9 or 10 courses. Are they all Python related or mostly all Python related?
They're all Python related in some way or another. So like I found there was all this stuff about files and networks that just didn't fit into any of my other Python courses. So I call it Python for System Administrators. Voila, 2-day course. Right. I found that I'd originally tried to teach regular expressions in my original Python course, and I found that the hour that I devoted to it was boring for the people who knew it already and useless for the people who didn't know it. So I carved out a 2-day course in regular expressions. Bam. Now I can teach that too. Right. So a lot of it was also discovering that it was better to have my courses be specialized, not just me be specialized. That each course, the tighter I could define, more tightly I could define it, then the more people would sort of be interested in taking it. And then I could break off the other pieces that were not part of that core course and turn into separate courses and give each of them their depth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's great. And so people might be noticing as they're listening to this that these are really specific. And in my personal history, like creating courses or books or some sort of curriculum or info product or something like that, I have a tendency, or I had a tendency, I don't anymore, to want to write the Bible about everything. So like, oh, I'm going to do the Bible, like the soup to nuts, every detail about FileMaker, or every detail about, the PHP API for FileMaker, or every detail about responsive web design, or every detail about PhoneGap, like, and just do like this comprehensive deep dive. And it's like, that's not usually, I mean, sometimes you want that, but what you're describing is more in line with my experience, which is that people know they have a particular need at a particular time, and they don't care. I mean, they might care about the money, but they're more interested in optimizing the time commitment to learn all that stuff. Like somebody doesn't want to take a 12-week course learning everything that ever happened with Git, but they might want to know Git or Python, but they might want to know, well, I've got some system administrators who need to use Python to move files around. Like maybe we should just drop them into a 1-day course.
Right. And by having all these upsells, makes it easier to talk to these companies also. Oh, you have these needs? Also, when a new company calls, I can say, oh, okay, you need this specialization. Well, I can just grab this piece from this course and that piece from that course. And they feel over the moon because they feel like, oh, we're getting a special thing. When for
Custom
me,
course,
it's like, right. They think it's custom. And I'm like, okay, you want to do this instead of that? Sure. I'll just swap out the modules and I'll teach something else. That's fine with me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what can you tell people about, the comment you made earlier about, oh, it's too bad training doesn't pay as well as development. Like my experience is that, geez, for a little while, I did a couple of courses with Americana, which was a training company that I think got acquired by Twitter or somebody, and they were all remote. And I think I was getting paid $3,000 a day to do remote training, like from my basement, my jammies, which was okay. I felt like I was pretty well known at the time, so I wasn't sure really who was attracting more customers, if it was me or them. It was probably them, but it didn't feel like that at the time. And I had a similar experience to you where I was like, I'm like literally, teaching this class from my computer in my house. Why not? What's Americana adding here other than attracting the clients? Which is non-trivial, but I knew how to do it.
Yes.
It's a big thing, but I knew how to do it. So it was kind of the same sort of thing. But, $3,000 a day to stand there at my desk and, for 6 hours or whatever it wasn't great, but it wasn't too bad. But, if they were probably getting paid, $5,000 or $6,000 or $7,000 or $8,000 for it, maybe more. So so if you imagine, dear listener, that you're getting paid, I don't know. Well, you tell me, Reuven, like what's a reasonable expectation for someone who's doing well to build to? So if you wanted to go into training and not even the travel part, but I don't know, you could break it down maybe, because I know you do some online stuff too. So like so I guess what I'm getting at is, what are the expectations?
So, first of all, the pay in Israel and in China is lower than in Europe and the US. So this is why I've been trying to get more into the US market and the European market, because quite frankly, it pays more. And by more, what do I mean? Well, the typical, the number that I've been told for several years now as a good, reasonable amount to charge for training in the US is $6,000 a day for about 20 people. Right? We're talking like $300 per person per day. Which means that, first of all, that means my 4-day course, $24,000. I have been told recently that that's probably low.
I think it's low. Yeah.
So it could very well be that I could be charging, $8,000 a day, $9,000 a day already.
If you're really getting 20 people, if they're only putting 2 people in it, yeah, they're going to start to complain, but
no, but these companies are big, right? They have people. And so it is totally not unreasonable to charge that amount. When I told a company that I want to charge $5,000 a day because I really just wanted to get in the door, first of all, as I'm sure you know, Jonathan, they could not have cared less about that $1,000 a day. It was not even, what did they care? They're a Fortune 100 company.
Yeah.
And in the end, it fell through. And when it fell through, I spoke to the manager and he said, listen, I feel really bad. It was this whole bad combination of circumstances that was no one's fault in particular. And he said, look, I feel really bad, but by the way, let me give you some advice. You're charging way too little.
Right.
Now, when a client tells you you're charging them too little, listen. So the next client, when I was approached by a company in Silicon Valley, I quoted $6,000 a day. And the only thing they complained about was the travel budget. So I said $6,000 a day. So it's 4 days. So that'll be, 6 4 is 24. So $24,000. And I said, and my travel. And I said, well, I really only travel business class. P.S. Not true.
See?
P.S. Not true, but I wanted to say that because I want to see what I could get away with. So they said, well, really, we're going to limit your travel to $3,000. Will that do it? And I looked up travel. I was like, listen, my flight is going to be all told, can we make it $4,000? And they said,
but do you see? Yeah, go ahead.
So they were willing and even insistent on negotiating on the travel expenses, but the course expenses, they could not have cared in the slightest, so far as I can tell.
Okay. So I have 2 reactions to that. One is that it's potentially a hilarious way to negotiate something, but not the important thing, which is usually what you want to do. So it could be a hilarious thing to say, what did you say? It was $6,000.
Yeah.
$24,000 for the course. And then you had so you could say something hilarious like, It's $35,000 for the 4-day course for up to 20, and it's $10,000 for travel. And they'd be like, $10,000 for travel, right? And then you could, right? Because it sounds crazy. The other thing that occurs to me is, and then you could negotiate it down to 5, and then you've made a concession, and you're still flying business class. The other thing is that you could, I don't know how often this is done in the training space, but surely in the consulting space, and certainly when I was doing consulting, I would include all of my travel expenses for a variety of reasons. One of which was to avoid conversations like that, to avoid derailing a gig over the fact that I wanted to stay at the Four Seasons and not, Motel 6. And and especially when the approval was going to go through some procurement department where, a lower level employee would be like, I cannot believe this person is, blah, 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 getting paid to stay at the Four Seasons. What a prima donna. I don't even want that to enter anybody's mind. I don't want that to delay payment. So I would just roll in a generous allowance for flight and et cetera, for whatever gig it was. And I just give them one big price, and I'd say it's all inclusive. I don't have to send you an expense report later. I'm going to pay for everything. You don't have to worry about any of that. It's just totally inclusive. And then it makes it a simpler decision for the buyer. And then when they forward it to like an accounting department, there's nothing for them to judge.
So I'll tell you, this company actually sort of wanted me to break it out, and separate it. And it actually worked to my advantage because so I did one course for them in San Jose, and I did another course for them in India. And it turns out, and by the way, like going to San Jose, so I wasn't in business class, but I was in like premium, like better than premium economy. It was more than adequate for my needs. Like really, come on. Like how pretentious do I have to be? I mean, it's nice, but and going to India, we basically just agreed on the same amount because we had agreed on this is the amount that my travel expenses are. So there I could be business class. And the funny thing is I paid exactly the same amount for my hotels in San Jose and in India. And, in San Jose, what that money got you was a basic budget hotel, which was fine for me. And in India, I've never been in a more luxurious place in my life. And I was expecting them to say, can we see the receipts, something? Yeah. And nothing at all. Like once it was approved, that's it. Now I'll give you a counterexample, by the way. So when I work with another company, and I've gone abroad for them a number of times, they actually have an amount of money that they will pay for travel and expenses. So they say, okay, your course costs this, and it's a 4-day course, so this is the allowance. And they've said they want to see receipts now. Because it sounds like what I used to describe was, like if I would go to Belgium for them sometimes, I would tell my wife, okay, if I swim to Belgium and I pitch a tent on in the park, then we just pocket all the money. And it seems that the procurement department sort of got wise to people like me being super cheap and getting a budget hotel and getting a cheap flight. Because I really don't care that much. As long as there's leg room, and then pocketing the difference. So now they got wise to that. Okay, you forced me. I'll have to take a better flight. Fine.
But look how far down, we've gone into the details of just silly,
it's silly stuff.
Right. The up the food chain. And so I haven't done nowhere near training on the scale that you have, but I have done it. And I would always try and keep the conversation at the buyer level. And in a consulting arrangement, I was always talking to people who were fairly far up the food chain, if not the top dog. And these are not the kind of people who worried about a few $100 here or there or receipts or anything like. They just don't care. It's like that's all noise to them. Somebody else will take care of that. So, if anyone ever takes care of it. So that's why I would roll everything into just one lump price. I'll get there. Don't worry about it. You don't have to make arrangements. You don't have to file receipts later. We don't even have to talk to your expense department. So the tricky thing is, like I said earlier, you could use it as a point of negotiation, but when you start talking about things that are so far from the value of what you're offering that you run afoul of some corporate policy, which is probably different from client to client to client. And, you could just, some people are just not going to swallow it. And maybe you say, I don't even want to make any advice here. So it's just something to think about.
You can decide how important it is to you, right? Like to me, it's important to have leg room on a flight. But like really and truly in a hotel, if I have like bed, bathroom, shower, and Wi-Fi, I'm happy.
So that's not even what I mean exactly. What I mean is what do you want to discuss with the client?
Right.
Not what's good enough for you, but like,
I see.
what do you want to discuss?
I was just saying, like, if I'm willing to negotiate on the travel expenses, like I'm willing to go down on that because, especially if they're paying me well for the course itself. And by the way, like coming in as an outside person, like I'm the outside expert trainer. So while I was in San Jose, the secretary who'd done all the communication came to me and she said, "So Peter, the guy, who invited you to come do this course, he'd like to have lunch with you tomorrow." I was like, "Oh, that's great." So I mentioned to some of my class, "Hey, you know Peter, right?" And they give me these glassy eyes and they're like, "That's my boss's 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 boss. You're having lunch with him?" Like, because he wanted to come meet the guy from abroad who was training his staff. So they see you as a valuable asset to their company.
Right.
And they don't mind paying the sort of top dollar because you're giving them so much value.
Right. Ideally, that's the way it's going to work. I do recognize that with consulting, it's like the Wild West. It still is the Wild West. There's like no way to compare apples to apples. With training, it's less so, where they've probably got some experience with other trainers or other training classes that they've had, and they have certain expectations around the price that are not necessarily connected to the value because, like you go out to buy a book and you expect it to cost, less than $100. Why? Because it's going to have less than $100 worth of value? No, because that's how much books cost.
Right.
So if you're working with someone who has an expectation, who buys thousands of training classes a year, they're going to have really strong pricing expectations. And if you want to exceed those prices or their expectations of your price, you're going to have to make it's an uphill battle. You can do it, but it's an uphill battle. But the good news is that if their expectations are kind of high, then it's not that, potentially not that hard of a sale because they're expecting to spend a ton of money anyway.
Right. And I'll add, two things there. One is the price, like part of the reason why training is such a lucrative thing for individuals is that the pricing that these companies expect to have, prices that these companies expect to pay, takes into account the marketing and the office and the staff and on and on. And so basically there's a reason why training companies take 50% because they have to pay all these other people. And me doing this on my own, I get to basically pocket what all those other people would get.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing
as long as you're getting leads, it's fine.
Right. The other thing is that there are other ways to charge for courses. One of them is per person. And I strongly prefer per day because then I say it's per day with a maximum number of participants of X. Mm-hmm. And then the onus is on them to get as many people as they can into the classroom up to that maximum. As opposed to if it were per person. And then they'd say, okay, we only got 5 people. And then it just becomes not worth it.
Right. Especially when you're flying around.
Right.
So that's a good segue into either on live or what? How do you describe an online course that you present live?
Well, there are different ones. Like there are the live online courses where it's like a webinar, mm-hmm. and I do that for companies. I've tried to do it on my own, and it was a failure. Just because reaching out to my mailing list and saying who would like it at such and such a time, the number of people who overlap with the right time zone and can take off time for it is very small. Yeah. So I'll do corporate training in that way, but I haven't done individual training, at least not successfully in that way. But then I have my recorded video courses, which mm-hmm. are sort of, recorded versions of what I do in person.
Yep.
And it's wildly different. It's like a totally different product, even though the content is the same. But the audience is different, the packaging is different, the pricing is different. It's like it's kind of been wild to learn those lessons as I get into that world.
So what can you kind of characterize the amount of effort it took to put together, like whatever? Let's say you've got a flagship course or your favorite course or the one that's the bestseller. How long does it take to put together something like that? Kind of like talk about that a little bit.
All right. So my sort of bread and butter course is Intro Python. It's 4 days long. So that means let's assume I'm teaching for, 5 hours, 5.5 hours of each of those days. Because then you have lunch and breaks and lots of exercises. So 5 times 4 is going to be 20 hours of video. I have not yet put all 20 hours of video of my Intro Python course up online because no one wants to buy a 20-hour course. I mean, I actually have like I have a course now, Pandas, that's like I've already got 10 hours of video, and I'm going to be adding another 2 hours, and I'm just going to cut it at that because like there is a limit as to how much you can do in one course if people want to pay. So I only do video courses of stuff I've taught many times previously. So for me, getting up and making these explanations and saying these things and giving these demos is something I've done dozens of times before. And my video method is very simple. I get up and I just present, and I do it in 5-10 minute segments. No part of my video is longer than 10 minutes long, and that I learned is important both for my production and for people not to sort of drift off, get bored, not know what's going on. So I do break my course. So if I have an hour presentation in class, I'll turn that into 5, 6, 7, 8 segments, and I'll write out in advance, like, okay, I'm going to talk about this, then talk about this, talk about this. And sometimes it gets messed up along the way, but it'll mostly work. And then I get up and I just talk. And if it goes well, I keep it. And if it does not go well, I re-record it. Yeah. And so it's all live and ad-libbed, from memory. Maybe I have a few notes on the side. And it seems to work. By the way, one of these days I'll get professional enough, smart enough, whatever, to have people do some like fancy video editing of my videos. But like, not right now. So how much time does it take? Let's assume that for every hour of video I put up, it's like 2 or 3 hours of actual work. And that's because I'm doing the minimum that I just described. Because there's the waiting for it to be encoded and the uploading and the mistakes and what do I want to do next? So every time I'm like, oh, I have a 3-hour window. I can record 3 hours of video. What a joke. I can maybe record half an hour to an hour on a really good day.
Right. Okay. So, what do you think that teaching, what am I trying to ask? I'm trying to ask how to get started. So let's say I am a React Native expert. I feel like I know all about it. I've been doing it as my day job for a long time. I've got a fairly popular open source repo that's related to React. I feel like I know what's up. I've got, thousands of followers on Twitter, or I've got, my repo's got like 4,000 stars. It's been forked a couple hundred times. People are sending me, you're not just nowhere. You've got the attention of some people. You've been creating things as a developer would create things like putting stuff on GitHub and maybe blogging or doing YouTube videos, just, kind of like to help the community, make the community bigger. What do you think, to the extent that you can answer a question like this, where should they start to get into training if that's what they feel like they want to do? Is it videos?
First of all, I think it's, look,
okay.
In-person training is, I think, more effective, and it teaches you more because it's interactive. Like, I always think the magic and the learning is in the interactions. And totally agree. I even wrote this blog post years ago where I said, I am never going to do online recorded training because and I gave all these analogies to television and movies and the theater, and I prefer to be there and feel the audience. And it's not just a money thing. It's also like, I really want to get the word out to as many people as possible. And I'm now stuck. Like, I don't have enough time. Also, I should add, like, the videos give me flexibility with clients where I say, well, I don't have 4 days, but I have 3 days. You want to buy my videos for the first day. And they go for that sometimes.
Oh, interesting.
So if they want to do it, I would say there are 2 different directions to start in. One is to do, keep it short. No matter what, keep it short. An hour, 2 hours of video, sell it for a small amount of money, or even start giving it away, or even do webinars first. In fact, let me back up. Do webinars. Because that will help you to get the rust off of your explanations, and you'll sort of get a feel for what is and is not necessary. Do them for free. Give them away. Then, once you've figured out the timing, you figure out the subject, then do a short, maybe an hour or 2, video course, put it up, advertise it to everyone you know, and don't charge that much for it. Charge something, but don't charge that much for it. You're going to learn so much just in that process that it'll be fantastic. And so the dilemma, or the sort of the 2 options I mentioned earlier were, do you do it for beginners where there's a larger market and you can really help people to understand things? Or do you do it for the experts, helping them address some problem that you see people struggle with all the time, like a security issue or an internationalization issue or a specific browser issue or something really that's like a big problem for a small number of people. My preference is generally to do it for beginners, for a wider audience, partly because I enjoy teaching them more, partly because it's easier to cater that audience. But that's up to you. But start small. And then you'll say, then you're going to get feedback from people and ask them for feedback. What do you think? What was good? What was bad? I use Drip. And when someone buys a course from me, so like I use Podia to sell my courses. And when someone buys a course at Podia, it sends a message to Drip. They get put on my mailing list. And 30 days later, they get email from me saying, so what do you think? And I get feedback from people saying, this was good, this was bad. Mostly this was good, but here and there. And also get apologies from people. Oh, I've been sick. I haven't watched it. Okay,
Right.
I hope you feel better. Right. But sometimes I'll get good constructive criticism from people and I'll go back and I'll fix things.
Very nice. So do you think that the in-person stuff that you're doing, do you think that over time you would phase that out or and go more online or self-paced video courses? Or do you think that those two things, there's a really good synergy with having both? Or do you feel like you're in a progression where, you're going to move away from something and move towards something else?
I'm in a progression because, look, I'm now 49 and I love what I do. I really, really
That's
do.
old.
I know. Like my 16-year-old, like she's in this entrepreneurship program and they had to do a survey over the summer. And part of the survey was, how old are you? And there was like, less than 10 and, 10 to 16. And then they had 40 plus. I was like, okay, like I know I'm as good as dead here, but fine. We keep laughing about this at home. But like the fact is, like right now I get a real rush from teaching 4 or 5 days every week, 4 weeks out of the month. I don't know how long I'm going to really want to do that. And so I'm trying to move into products more and more, partly so that I can then have the luxury of saying, you know what, I'm only going to teach 1 week out of the month, or I can choose. Also, once I have that time, then I can research, like it's sort of, what would you call, not a vicious cycle, a virtuous cycle, where the more courses I sell online, the more that gives me time to do more courses online. And if I could have a library of, 20, 30, 40 courses, that would be great.
Sure. Excellent. Wow, I could talk all day. This is been fabulous. I think that people listening who have a skill, they've got an expertise, they're probably a developer, but they don't, and not necessarily a developer. I know there are copywriters and photographers and other folks like that listening who have this expertise, and there's this, it's almost a fork in the road, I think, where you could say, well, who am I going to share this expertise with? Am I going to apply the expertise or advise clients who need this expertise about how to do the thing? Or am I going to teach essentially my peers? Or am I going to directly transfer the expertise to someone else versus applying the expertise or helping people apply the expertise? It feels like a pretty big fork in the road. So for folks who are thinking about transferring their expertise to peers, essentially, I think that Reuven really, you're a shining example, honestly. I honestly cannot think of anybody else who does so much to kind of advocate for that approach. I literally can't think of anyone else. You're the double positioned, the go-to Python trainer and the trainer. Very nice.
Look, I feel very fortunate because, so many people talk about teaching as a wonderful thing to do, but doesn't pay. And I feel like I've got the best of all worlds. I go to companies and people thank me for helping them improve their careers, improve their work, improve their products, and they're paying me for it. So if I can help other people to, achieve that sort of, pleasant position, like good feeling that you're doing good and also, doing well in the, in your business, all the better.
Yep. Yeah. You're making impact and getting paid well for it. That's great. Cool. Where should people go to find out more about you online and maybe connect?
So my website is at Lerner, that's lerner.co.il. And from there, you can find my mailing list. You can find my main mailing list for developers. Better developers, you can find my Trainer Weekly list. You can find my free email courses and, of course, my paid online courses and a list of like what I do in terms of corporate training. You can catch me on Twitter. I don't tweet that much except about like my new blog posts and so forth at Reuven M. Lerner. That's Reuven M-Lerner. I guess we'll have the show notes so you don't need to follow my quick spelling. And I'm always happy to hear from people. I really, really love talking to people who are interested in training from all around the world. And if I can help push people forward and get them even to like try it out, it might be it's not for you, but at least give it a whirl and see how it goes.
Excellent. Thanks so much for joining us, Reuven.
My pleasure. Look forward to talking to you again and hearing from your listeners as well.
Fabulous. All right, that's it for this time around on Ditching Hourly. I'm Jonathan Stark, and I hope you join us again next time. Bye. Hey, Jonathan again. The next time someone asks for your hourly rate, I want you to stop what you're doing and go to valuepricingbootcamp.com to sign up for my free value pricing email course. That URL again is valuepricingbootcamp.com. Hope to see you there.